The county's numbers today show this is one of the deadliest flu seasons on record.
Time is our biggest enemy, and so as witnesses die, as soil conditions erode the bones, it becomes a very challenging endeavor.
Families of military veterans missing in action will get a chance to have some of their questions answered this weekend in San Diego. And we take a look at the challenges to coming in off the streets once you become homeless. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. County health officials say the number of flu cases is down again this week, but the number of deaths has reached a new high. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more.
142 people have now died from this season's flu. According to health officials, it's now the deadliest flu season since they started tracking data nearly 20 years ago. The previous high was during the 2014-15 season when 97 people died. This week, there were also just over 2,000 flu cases confirmed compared to last week's 3,000. While county health officials say those numbers are high, they have been slowly decreasing over the last 2 weeks. If that trend continues, that could mean we're getting past this season's peak. But there are still 2 months left in a typical San Diego flu season, and already over 12,000 cases have been found. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The CDC says the best way to avoid the flu is to get the shot every year. But AP reporter Kathy Young says scientists are working on a universal vaccine that would only need to be administered once.
It was one of the deadliest pandemics in history. The Spanish flu swept the globe, killing tens of millions of people. 100 years later, researchers say the world isn't immune to another catastrophic superflu. There have been 3 influenza pandemics since 1918, taking place in 1957, 1968, and the latest in 2009.
People say it is not if, but when, and I think that sums it up very well.
Peter Palacey was part of a team that reconstructed the 1918 influenza virus. Palacey says there still is no way to accurately predict which of today's flu virus strain could trigger another pandemic or how bad it could be.
This was an influenza virus, which was really very different from earlier strains and also from strains which we have right now.
But labs across the country, like this one at the National Institutes of Health, may finally be closing in on a universal flu vaccine.
A vaccine that is going to protect you against essentially all or most strains of influenza.
Flu virus is coded in a protein that constantly changes to evade the immune system, the reason you need a new vaccine every year. That protein essentially has a head and a stem. Today's vaccines target the head, where most of the mutations occur. Within the last 10 years, scientists discovered the stem stays relatively unchanged from year to year, which is why the focus of the universal flu vaccine now targets the stem.
If everything works out well, we should be having a universal influenza virus vaccine within years, not decades or centuries.
Researchers hope that will mean eventually getting a one-time shot instead of a yearly one. Today's annual flu shot is at best only 60% effective, and it's tough to make. Most manufacturers use traditional production methods like growing the virus in chicken egg yolk.
Just got to get away from the necessity of growing the virus. That's the thing that takes so many months to get to where we need to be.
While researchers know the current seasonal flu vaccine isn't perfect, they say it serves as a safety net.
Not everyone may be protected 100%, but it is certainly better than no safety belts.
The ultimate preparation is a universal flu vaccine, something that you could stockpile and you don't have to be chasing a pandemic.
While the events of 100 years ago seem like a part of the distant past, it's at the forefront for those working to guard the public from a future pandemic. Kathy Young, Associated Press.
The Department of Defense will meet with families of missing service members this weekend in San Diego. It's part of a project to return their remains. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
About 286 people are expected at the San Diego Marriott Mission Valley Saturday to hear an update about their lost loved ones. Director Kelly McGee of the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency says closure is still important, even among families of World War II veterans.
Oftentimes we're finding in the case of World War II families, second, third generation family members know as much about their loved one, their great-grandfather, great-uncle. It's as important to them as it was for their great-grandmother.
This is the fourth time they've met in San Diego. Families receive individual updates, like the case of Mary Benton, whose husband was last seen standing guard at a post in Vietnam.
May have been overcome by malaria, as some of his comrades in arms were, and may have wandered off from the post. That's all we know and have been able to piece together.
Families may be asked to give DNA samples. DNA has become a key to their recent successes, like the recovery of remains of Marines at Tarawa some 70 years after the battle in the Pacific.
Time is our biggest enemy, and so as witnesses die, as soil conditions erode the bones, it becomes a very challenging endeavor.
They hit a high of recovering 183 bodies in 2017. In the past, there have been complaints of bureaucratic slowdowns and long backlogs. McKeague says that the agency has become more efficient in the past 3 years. It needs to be. They estimate potentially 34,000 American service members are still out there waiting to be found. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
San Diego Unified is getting this year's budget season off to a different start after a rocky budget process last year. KPBS education reporter Megan Burke says the district is also making it easier for parents to give their input.
The district is circulating a simple online survey asking parents what they can go without and what has to stay in the budget. The district could have to cut close to $54 million. That comes on the heels of $124 million in budget cuts this year. Trustee Sharon Whitehurst Payne says even with parent input, the budget process won't be easy. More than 90% of the budget covers personnel, meaning pink slips are likely.
You're not talking about cutting back on the number of tables you make or the number of chairs or beds or whatever. You're actually talking about human beings.
The district could end up having to cut much less depending on the state budget. Its board will hear an updated number Tuesday. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
A new federal audit says California miscalculated its graduation rate for the 2013-2014 school year. Auditors say more than 10,000 students were improperly removed from the calculation, inflating the graduation rate from 79% to 81%. State officials say the errors are due to discrepancies in state and federal regulations. They say they will work to make sure districts are using the federal guidelines. California state leadership responded to Homeland Security officials today who say they're considering pressing criminal charges against state officials who implement sanctuary state policies. California lawmakers say it's only an attempt to intimidate them. Meanwhile, the state's law enforcement agencies are adapting to the new changes in state law that officially limit their cooperation with federal officials in immigration cases.
You may have somebody who's been, say, convicted of a crime, but you may not have a rap sheet that indicates that. So that's been the biggest challenge we've seen thus far, is trying to make sure we're communicating about the right people in the right circumstances.
Opponents of California's sanctuary status say the measure threatens public safety. California's Attorney General filed another lawsuit against the federal government, this time over net neutrality. Javier Becerra has joined 20 other states in the suit against the FCC, which voted to repeal net neutrality late last year. He says it will hurt people who struggle financially.
When something streams through the internet, we all can have access to it. And the airwaves should be recognized as belonging to the people. And so the people should not be forced to pay extra prices for a service that all of us should be able to get.
Critics accuse of Sarah of wasting taxpayer money by attempting to combat federal issues. The high surf advisory in San Diego has been extended until Saturday. A few San Diegans enjoyed the waves this morning at Oceanside Pier, but experts warn swimmers should probably stay out of the water. They say waves at some county beaches could reach up to 15 feet. As for the rest of the forecast, temperatures are dropping and rain is on the way. Erin Calandra has more.
Hopefully you had a fantastic day today. The weather not too bad, but be ready. You'll need your umbrellas by Friday because we do have some showers heading in our direction. Today it was pretty uneventful. Not much happening across the county and a couple clouds passing through at times, especially in the morning. We did have a little bit of fog in places. For tonight, we dropped down to 53 degrees, partly cloudy conditions, and that's really how much of the county is going to look. More clouds toward the coast than in the deserts, for example. Oceanside 45, San Diego 53, Ramona 45 tonight. Borrego Springs reaching 45 degrees. Now Thursday, another great day. It's going to be on the mild side, so slightly above average as far as temperatures. We'll have plenty of sunshine, but here comes the rain. It's not going to reach us on Thursday, but it certainly will on Friday. We have a cold front that's moving down from the north. It's going to change our temperatures too. So here we are on Thursday for our temperatures. Oceanside 70 degrees, San Diego coming in at 70 as well. Chula Vista 71, and further inland a bit warmer. So Ramona 78 and Alpine 76 degrees. Here's a look at the national picture. It's finally starting to warm up on the East Coast. A nice mild flow for this weekend. Right now we are certainly seeing some snowstorms all across the East Coast, causing problems for travelers. Here we are back closer to home for the 5-day forecast on Thursday. Another nice day, but then here comes that front. We're going to have some showers off and on all day. Temperatures at 63. By Saturday, we are going to dry out with some sunshine, maybe some leftover morning showers, but temperatures drop down to 61. Our lows are going to be in the 30s, so it's certainly going to be a cooler pattern for a few days. Inland again, 79 on Thursday. Look at that temperature drop overnight. Friday, 65 degrees with showers. And then in the mountains, dropping down to 50 degrees with showers. And the deserts, well, they're going to stay dry. Temperatures getting a bit cooler, though. Ebony, back to you.
A San Diego geochemist is being remembered as a diligent and wise colleague after succumbing to cancer. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has his story.
The Scripps Institution of Oceanography community is mourning the death of researcher David Hilton. He lost a 5-year battle with cancer earlier this month. Hilton studied tectonics, solid earth dynamics, and noble gases. Justin Kulongowski was one of the researcher's first graduate students, and he says Hilton authored more than 100 peer-reviewed papers, articles, and books, and his work is cited some 6,000 times in other publications.
It's kind of a measure of how well your work is read and how widely known it is.
Hilton spent most of his professional life in the lab analyzing samples and writing, but he wasn't afraid to venture out into the field. This video was taken during a research trip to Ethiopia, where Hilton was collecting samples from a hot air vent.
David was very thoughtful and also very competitive. He was very driven by the science, and I think that shows in how productive he was over the years.
Kulongowski says he valued Hilton's high expectations because it helped drive him to do better work. Now, Hilton's family is requesting that in lieu of flowers to consider donating to science education or STEM, or just to have a good medium rare steak and a beer, and to think of David while you're doing so. David Hilton was 59. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Experts and academics weigh in on the future of San Diego's economy tomorrow. The San Diego County Economic Roundtable also offers a snapshot of the area's job outlook. Sarah Burns, the Director of Research and Evaluation at San Diego Workforce Partnership, joins us tonight for tonight's New Economy Report. And you'll be presenting at the San Diego Economic Roundtable. Give us a brief snapshot of what you'll discuss.
Sure. Well, what we're seeing right now in our economy is a really low unemployment rate, which is exciting, but also is leading a lot of economists to predict that we're going to see some slowing in our job growth. So we're looking at really the hardest to serve as our workforce that needs support right now. So I'll be talking about some of the ways that we can work with that population to help to meet the workforce needs of our companies.
When you say the hardest to serve, what population are you referring to?
Sure. You can think about, we have a large number of people who either don't have a high school diploma or stopped their education after high school. So when we think about where a lot of the opportunities will be, it's in what we call middle skill jobs. So jobs that require more than a high school diploma, but less than a 4-year degree. So helping to identify where those people are and how we can help them get the training they need to fill those middle skill jobs.
And you mentioned a slowing. San Diego workforce has identified a potential shortage of educators. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, that's actually even a national trend. We see that over the past number of years, the education field has had trouble recruiting. We see a lower number of students who are actually entering education programs because of all kinds of things. You can think about the pay not being as competitive as we might like, some of the stresses that come with trying to create an educational environment that supports our workforce needs. So it's certainly a challenge that we're seeing in our county.
And San Diego County is known for tourism. What are you seeing in this respect?
Of course. So tourism has been growing strong, of course. And what we're really focusing on is finding the best way to support people in tourism to progress in their careers. There's lots of low-wage, low-skilled jobs in tourism, which is great. We need that, and that's healthy for our economy. But also thinking about those people long-term, how are we helping them as a workforce board and as employers to upskill, to move on in their careers and to take the skills they learned and do more with them while still having a pipeline to come in and fill those roles.
And San Diego workforce has identified priority sectors. What are these?
Sure. So these are 5 sectors that we really focus on because of high potential for growth, and specifically in job growth with wages that pay above the self-sufficiency rate. So those 5 sectors are healthcare, life sciences, information and communication technology, advanced manufacturing, and clean energy. And when we look at job growth in all of these, especially since the recession, they've all been trending upward. And when we talk to employers in these sectors, in our most recent survey that happened sort of middle of last year, we see that up from 30 to 60% of employers are projecting hiring permanent employees in the next year. So while we see this slowing in job growth, we know it's still coming, and especially in these sectors that are really important for our economy.
So if you're a young person, or maybe you're an older person trying to re-enter the workforce, are there certain careers that are doing better than others and that people should maybe consider focusing on?
Sure. Well, healthcare is a huge one. You'll hear there's more registered nurses in our county than any other job, and there's a huge need for it, especially in very specialized types of nurses. Other healthcare jobs as well. You don't need to be someone who wants to work directly with patients or get into diagnosing illnesses. You can be someone who is very organized and interested in the more support staff role, like medical coders. So healthcare is a huge one, especially since that's what we consider recession-proof. As the recession hit and all other industries saw a slight or a large decline, healthcare keeps growing because it's something that we're always going to need.
Sarah Burns with the San Diego Workforce, thank you so much for talking with us. The San Diego County Economic Roundtable starts tomorrow at the Joan B. Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice. We'll continue to follow more stories of the new economy on air and online at kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, I talk with Democratic Senator Dick Durbin on the fate of immigration reform. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
San Diego's Regional Task Force on the Homeless is looking for volunteers. They need people who can help with this year's annual census of the homeless people next Friday, January 26th. It starts early in the morning at 4 o'clock and lasts until about 7. The task force's chief operating officer says it can give volunteers a whole new perspective on homelessness.
Volunteers wanting to understand homelessness is a great place to do it. It's a great way to learn and actually have a conversation with someone who's experiencing it and really begin to know what are the challenges, how difficult, how many, and what are we doing to solve those problems.
The areas where the most volunteers are still needed are Oceanside, Rancho Bernardo, Ramona, Fallbrook, and Vista. Volunteers can sign up on the task force website at rtfhsd.org. The deadline is this Sunday, January 21st. Formerly homeless youth struggle to move from transitional housing into permanent housing. From KCTS in Seattle, producer Chris Barnes says the story is all too common in a city with one of the highest rents in the nation.
Routes 48 to University District, Central District.
I'm struggling to find that what I want to do in life and what I actually can do right now is not on the same level. I can't really do what I want to do right now. I gotta just survive. I was 15 when I became homeless. My mom had a really good job, and then she lost that job for whatever reason. I don't know. I was going to school, you know, just being a kid, and I guess she fell back behind on her rent because, you know, the place that we were living at was a little bit more. Basically got priced out of the place that we were living at the time. I didn't really realize what was going on. I just knew that, you know, hey, mom's not as happy as she was before, and, you know, she seems a little bit sad. And then I found out because we were going to lose our housing. So after we got evicted, we went to my grandparents' house. My mom was trying to find another job and more housing. She found out she needed to go to a shelter to qualify for more housing, and my grandparents moved out of town, so I couldn't stay there anymore. I never thought I'd be in that position. I had to stay at McDonald's a few nights. Sometimes I'd go to sleep, but then the employees would be like, hey, you know, you can't sleep here. Or just stay up and just wander around downtown Renton was the area that we were in at that point in time. Eventually, I ended up meeting my girlfriend, and I was staying at her mom's house, so I was just couch surfing, but that didn't work out. It really forced me to think and realize some things, like where I'm at now and where I can go and how I can help myself to get there. I really love and respect my mom a lot. I know whatever happened was most likely out of her control. She helped it as much as she could, and the situation, it got worse. And I don't ever blame her. It's not her fault. So my current housing situation, I'm in a transitional living facility. One of the things about transitional housing, there's a time limit that you have to be there. It's about 1.5 years-ish. And then once that time comes, you know, you're supposed to move on. And a lot of times you either going right back to homelessness or to another transitional housing facility. The struggles that I'm seeing with finding permanent housing after my transitional housing is increasing rent prices and just how overpriced it is really everywhere. I said I'm making $1,700 a month between the 2 jobs. I dishwash, and I have another job at the Mockingbird Society as a chapter leader for the YEAH chapter, Youth Advocates Ending Homelessness.
The Mockingbird Society, we work with youth and young adults who all have experience with foster care or homelessness to become their own best advocates, and that's done through youth programming, but as well as legislative work and policy change. Terry got involved with Mockingbird Society actually before I did, and right after I came on, a chapter leader position opened up. Terry, you know, is working, right? Terry is trying to afford rent in Seattle. So we recognize that, and we want to pay those folks, you know, a wage that really values their time and values their expertise and demonstrates that.
I'm finding it's really impossible to find affordable housing for me personally, just because it's so expensive. I'd have to work so many hours a week, like at least like 80 or something, and make more than what I'm making at the minimum wage right now. At first, in my free time, I wanted to go to school and pursue my education and get my business license. I really want to open up a restaurant and be a business owner, but I have to work a lot more now. I have to get a third job and maybe even a fourth job. I really don't want to go back to being homeless. So what gets me through is I think about my future and where I want to be and all the people I want to help and all the things that I want to do, and mostly help my mom and take care of her. Just really imagining, putting myself there in that business suit in my restaurant, you know, in my office. All this hard work will pay off. Just really believing that my struggles and all this is to be learned from and gained and overcome and used for something better.
You can read more about Terry's story online at kcts9.org. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.